So hello everyone. Thank you all for joining Running Start and ASGA for this event. The title of this event, someone's not on mute. The title of this event is Long Distance Student Leadership. And we're really excited to work on this event with you all because I think we're all, globally in this new experience of, everyone here probably had to, if you were on campus, leave your campus earlier in the year, and we don't know exactly what our situation is going to be even in the fall semester for a lot of you. And so there's just a big change in, how do you lead a student body if you're not actually all together physically? And what other things should people have in mind as they are pursuing student leadership in this time of this global pandemic? So I'm Jess Kelly. I'm the Chief of Staff of Running Start. I'm very excited to see you all today. I'll introduce a few other speakers in just a moment, but I want to just do a couple housekeeping things. One is that we did this as a meeting instead of a webinar because we love to see everyone's face. So you're welcome to keep your camera on if you'd like, but it also means we ask everyone to keep your mic muted throughout. And we're going to really use the chat. So as you can see, people are introducing themselves in the chat already. Please keep doing that. Say hello, say where you're from. And then I also am going to ask everybody to use the chat to ask questions throughout. And I'll be monitoring the chat as some of the other speakers are speaking, and I'll choose some questions from there to ask throughout our time together. I also hope you use the chat to share your own thoughts and ideas. This is such an amazing group to have convened of student leaders from all over the country. And so my hope is that we walk away with not just some great ideas from our speakers, but also from all of you. So if you have something to contribute to the conversation, put it in the chat and I'm going to save it and we'll follow up with a document that contains everybody's tips and tricks that they're sharing throughout our time together in our chat. With that, I want to just introduce Running Start. So this event is put together by Running Start and the ASGA, the American Student Government Association. As your representative from Running Start, I want to tell you just a little bit about us. So we are a nonpartisan nonprofit, and our mission is to train young women to run for office. So our primary audience is high schoolers and college students, and we give our young women the confidence, capabilities, and connections that they need to run for office, both down the line for political office, but also right where they are, and that really includes student government. We see it as a really fantastic way to start to build skills and experience that will serve you when you want to get into politics even after school. So a couple things about Running Start that I hope that you all will keep in mind is that we have a lot of programs that are really, that are aimed at college students. One being our Congressional Fellowship, where we are able to bring college women to DC for an entire semester and set them up in internships with women members of Congress. The other being Elect Her, where we do a one-day training on campuses all over the country to get more women to run for student government. And so at the end, you'll see some information on how to learn more about both of those programs. But I'm looking forward to a really fantastic discussion today, not only with the man I'm about to introduce, but also with several Running Start alums who you'll meet as we go on. But I'm happy to introduce Butch Oxendine from ASGA and have him share a little bit about that organization.
Thanks, Jess. It's great to work with all of you. ASGA has been doing these webinars weekly, and so we're partnering with Running Start this week, and ASGA, obviously the American Student Government Association, and we do training, research, analysis conferences, at least we used to, for student leaders all over the country. And so right now, this subject matter of today's webinar is totally relevant, totally apropos. It is right now we need to deal with how do we connect with our student body, how do we connect with administrators, and then maybe programming even, what do we do? So it's a very, very opportune discussion. So I look forward to working with all of you. Fire away with questions too. And asjahome.org is the website. Many of you are members. I see several faces already in the gallery. Hey, Russ, how you doing from Jersey and others. And so It's really good to be with you today. Let's get to it, huh?
Great. Thanks, Butch. So I'm going to introduce the first of our 3 student speakers, who is going to introduce the first of 3 broad topics that we think we should be thinking about in terms of how to be an effective student leader during COVID-19. The first one being, thinking about how you're working with the administration. And later on, we'll talk about how to be a good leader of your own team remotely. And then after that, how to engage the student body. But I'm excited to introduce Yolian Ogbu to talk about working with the administration. Take it away, Yolian.
Awesome. Well, hey everyone, my name is Yolian, and I just finished up my term as the student body president at the University of North Texas. So it's been a wild ride for sure, and I'm really excited to talk a little bit about how to work with administration effectively. Some of the things that I've learned throughout my past year, or just in student leadership in general, especially when working with administration, is one, recognizing that when you were first campaigning and saying all the platform points that you did have, that is a very different experience than actually being in that leadership position. What you'll realize is that change in a lot of ways can seem very nuanced. And the things and the goals that you may have, when you're first running for office, can look very different than at the end of your term, when you realize that you may have had to solve some of the problems that you originally had in a very different way. And so I guess the first thing I recognized was I had to keep an open mind and know that everything that I originally campaigned for may not be the exact output that I receive. And so I think the first couple things that I would love to think about when I think about like working with administration is kind of having this process of how you're going to go about any of the ideas or platform points that you did have when you ran. And I'm assuming that a lot of people who did run for office during the time of COVID probably had a lot of points that had to do with how to deal with college during this time in which we're all at home or just not on campus. And so some of the things that I thought of was, one, having that concept in your mind from day one on what you want to accomplish. And that's usually your platform itself. But the second thing is, I would always suggest pitching to your advisor on what exactly you want to accomplish, because it's usually your advisor in most cases that knows who you need to talk to and how you need to go about potentially solving this issue that you have, or completing or accomplishing something on your platform. But then also, and I think we're probably going to get into it, Butch is probably going to take it away here in a minute to just talk a lot about these tips. But I always say to do your research. There's so much that you can find online on how other schools had accomplished what you're looking to accomplish at your institution, how they went about it, and those are great examples to use. And I always suggest having proposals to give to your administration. But also remember that no does not always mean no. So when an admin at this time says, we might have budget cuts because of COVID, because that is a reality for a lot of universities at this point, I would just say always remember that does not always mean a solid no, and you can always find a way to accomplish what you're looking for. Maybe not in the way that you're looking at right now, but you can always accomplish if you make sure that you can keep a little bit of stubbornness and know that no does not always mean no. So those are some of the tips that I have, but I'm really excited to hear what Butch has to say about his perspective on a national perspective.
All right. Well, thanks so much. There are pros and cons of the time we're in right now. You agree with that? Definitely pros. There are definitely cons. One of the pros I've seen, and I deal with thousands and thousands of student leaders and administrators every year, is right now, administrators at the highest levels are less distracted than I've ever seen them in my career. They're less distracted by the normal things that we've all had on our campuses. I don't need to go into those, what they are. That lack of distraction allows for us to get their attention. And their attention, and what I'd like to see you do as you work toward the coming year and working with your administrators, is one of the things we always recommend, and there's a child running through the room. That's what you get when you're at home, right? So what we need to do is, and we have a resource for this, it's to see how your administration sees your government. We call it the administrator test. And it's a tool for you to understand how does administration see your government right now. And you can score yourselves with this test. If you're a member, it's easily available in our toolbox called the administrator test. If you're not, I'll give you access. All you got to do is write me after the webinar is over. But this test will let you determine what your role is on campus officially. I'd love to see a summit of you and other leadership at your school, virtually if it has to be, so be it. But it's like, what is the role of our student government? And what does administration want us to work on? What is exactly our role? Some of you, it's very clearly outlined. There may be even laws at the larger institutions present in this webinar about the student government role at your institution and in the state, public schools in particular. But many of us, student government exists at the whim of administration at the highest levels, your trustees, your regents, and what is your role? Right now, other voices are coming from all kinds of different places to challenge administration. What is student government's official role? Are you the official voice? This all needs to be determined because we can't, how can we speak for student body if we're not the official voice? Illinois State, here's an example. A few years back, got the trustees at Illinois State University to codify student government's role and make it officially the voice and only voice of the student body, the official representative body. And so I'm recommending something like that. That was a resolution passed by the trustees unanimously. It made it very clear who speaks for the student body. Okay, so we have a resource, and I know the student mentioned a minute ago the idea of how do we get what we want? Well, we have a resource on that subject, and it takes you through 6 steps. How do we get what we want? One of those is exactly what I just said. Making sure your role with student government, what is your role on campus? How does administration see you? And there are levels. There are levels. The greatest student governments are seen as colleagues by key administrators. They're at the collegial level, meaning if I'm the president, I see you as president of student body or an officer as a colleague, and we're working together to solve problems. Many student governments are not even close to that level, and it's helpful to know that. There is one called a parental level, and they see you, you've heard the term in loco parentis, right? In place of parent. And administrators often see us in student government as children, and we have to be protected and managed. And you see, so we get past that. We have to know that we're in that situation and prove we are worthy almost in a sense of respect. It's a reality that we face at many schools, particularly those of you who are at technical and community colleges, because there's such transition all the time. So anyway, there we go. That's an overview. Fire with questions too throughout, and I'll pass it over to Jess now.
Absolutely. So as a reminder, use the chat to share your questions as we go along. I don't see any questions, I don't think, yet about working with administration. One question about where will the recording be posted. We'll send everybody here a follow-up with the link to the recording. But I'll give you a second to type some questions into the chat. Here we go. How do you make sure that your relationship is established with administration? That's a good one.
Anybody want to chime in? I'm a believer in contracts and resolutions and making it very clear in writing what our role is. Some of you may have a regular presidential meeting or meeting with the trustees. Some of you may even have a student trustee that's part of your government. And if you don't, we have research on how to establish that. Very difficult to do, but it's not impossible to establish a student trustee position so you're at the highest levels of the institution decision making. So a lot of this is structural. It's structural. It's using this time that we're in right now, fixing your structure so that moving forward, you do have a much more clear role on campus, that your relationship with administration is established. Many of you have committee assignments and committee appointments. You serve on college or university-wide committees. And so those of you that don't have that, this is your chance to develop those. And both of our organizations can help you with these things post-webinar. So there we go.
And someone's asking again for the name of the tool.
Okay, so it's found at the ASGA website, and it's under Toolbox, which makes sense, right? It's tools to help you get better. It's called the Administrator Test. It's one of our assessment tools that we've developed over the years. One is how effective is your student government. That's a test. You get a grade. See if you're an A, B, C, D, whatever you are. But the Administrator Test goes along with that one. It's called the Administrator Test, found in the Toolbox at the ASGA website. And again, you can get access, no charge. Just write me and I'll get you a password.
And I just put, I think, the link to it in the chat as well for everyone.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one right there.
Great. And Barbara's asking, how do you help encourage the soft-spoken student to feel comfortable with working with the administration? Any thoughts on that?
I'll just add something really quick. I know that I had several members of my team that we kind of were a mix. We had outgoing people, like I was super, I am an extrovert, and then I had a lot of my peers be, introverts. And I think that there were pros and cons to all of those different personality types. But what really helped, I think, more soft-spoken students was that we went in teams. Like we made sure that if I was the president at the time, and if my strategic planning director was to go into a meeting with an administrator that she may not have a relationship with already, I would at least go with her for the first 2 meetings, maybe until she started, establishing some rapport. And even then, once we have identified administrators or staff members that we are really cool with, which I think is such a great thing to do, is have at least one staff member administrator that you do have a great relationship with, even they would help connect us or even come to the meetings with us too. So for me, I think it's always been helpful to bring more people and make it a more team effort.
That's great advice. Butch, anything to add?
Well, I'm a professional presenter, and that doesn't mean, though, that necessarily you have to do everything in person. I'm a better communicator in writing than I am, frankly, doing workshops. And so I get a lot more accomplished in building relationships by email, text, etc. And there's also a paper trail, which is useful.
That's great. And we have 2 people who now want to know, what do the students do when the administration is not listening to student leaders? Any advice on that?
Well, I can add a few things to that, because I definitely have had my fair share of experiences where student leaders and I would ask for things and would be met with a no, that's not going to happen, or other such things like that. And I think that what has helped us is, one, recognize that, and this is assuming that your student government has established that relationship, that you are the official voice or that you are the official representative. Even then, we kind of employed the use of other orgs and other org representatives, and kind of that idea of people power to us is really, at least to me, is really important. And so largely throughout the year, when we have gotten to a point where we've hit a dead end a lot, we would try and get a lot of public support. That has really helped. And I think that when we found that we got a huge amount of public support from our students, whether that's via a resolution through the Senate, or just a poll, or even an event where we get numbers on who would be interested in seeing something like this happen, or if we make posts, we were great at utilizing our social media tools to gain a lot of support for certain certain points that we were trying to make, or things that we wanted to accomplish. So to me, I think public support is really important, and when that happens, it kind of has to bend the will, at least I've seen it happen, of administrators, because they've realized that, oh, well, the majority of students want this and need this and probably won't stop talking about it till they get it.
So my question back to you, Tamika, is how is your student government perceived? What's been the history of your government? And a lot of times we see student governments that have been very ineffective. They're impeaching each other literally every day. Lots of unfilled positions in their government, uncontested races. And this, if I'm an administrator, I know this and see this. And I just don't believe, frankly, that you actually represent your students. So one of the things we're going to talk about later, and I don't want to jump ahead too far, but we're going to talk about how do you really know what students want from you and what they want you to champion. And I think too often student governments make assumptions about what students want. We don't have facts to back it up, and it's obvious. So that's part of the reason that we don't have success sometimes with dealing with administration. But we also do a workshop is what can you really accomplish? And I'm a realist and a pragmatist on what can be done in a term of office. And so there are some things that are virtually impossible. Even now I'm seeing things that are virtually impossible to change. Here's an example. You're a faith-based institution. Some of you in the room here, you may be faith-based. You're not going to get alcohol served on your campus. That's an impossibility at a faith-based school. You see what I mean? So think about examples like that. There may be some things that are virtually impossible to change. How far do we want to champion that and push that? Do we want to take that issue on? I'm a pragmatist. I want you as government leaders to win when you take on a challenge. When you take on an issue, I want you to win, meaning you get it done. So we have to be selective, and this is part of strategizing. We strategize what can we really accomplish, what are the things we're going to focus on, and purposely choose issues that we can succeed. And that's going to build over time our influence. This is a process. We got to think bigger than 1 year in our term of office. Many of us are, we're serving a year and our terms are already a couple of months in, so we got to be thinking bigger picture and strategizing. We can help with that too later too.
That's great. And Stefania also says obtaining data has been very helpful for her campus too. So we're gonna dig in a little bit more towards the end on ways to do that. I want to move on to our second topic though, which personally has been one of my interests as a chief of staff of Running Start. All of a sudden I had to go from, managing a team where we all saw each other every day to managing a team where everybody's remote. And there's a lot of, different norms and things that you have to think about, not only in working together efficiently, but, creating that team atmosphere. So I'm excited to introduce our next student speaker, Ashley Alvarado, who is going to talk a little bit more about what's worked for her. Ashley, take it away.
Thank you, Jess. And I'm going to say a bit about my experience. So my experience is I am the vice president of the Student Government Association at SUNY Old Westbury. I'd also been a campus life senator a year beforehand. So I've seen student government from that aspect and the aspect that I currently have now. So I'm going on to the topic when we talk about leading your own team. We need to ask ourselves, what is leadership? The first aspect of being a leader comes with the realization that leadership is something that you earn. And earning that comes with mindfulness. You need to be mindful of how you are connecting and creating relationships with your team. So what are the steps that you can take to be a mindful leader? I will list 3 steps. I put 2 fingers up, but 3 steps that it takes to be a mindful leader that you can take today. 1, recognize how easy it is to lose people's attention. Say you're in a situation where you're talking about an important change in university policy. Very important. But you notice that the body language in the Zoom room is telling you that people are disinterested. So first, ask yourself this. What is the energy that I'm putting out? If you're giving this policy in monotone, you will lose people. Leaders are able to adjust their energy to capture their team. This comes with experience, of course, but as soon as you become the person that is able to open your eyes and notice what people are doing and adjust your behavior to that, that's when you start to see improvement. The next thing I can talk about is making sure that your team understands what you're saying and do it in a way that enforces them to be active. Most people say, "Did you understand what I'm talking about?" And that warrants a yes or no response. But to get people more active, you want to ask, "What do you believe I just said?" Because that forces people to be more engaged and give you their idea of what they understood from your conversation. One, make sure that your meetings are meaningful as well. Don't have a meeting that could have just been summarized in an email. That's a mistake that a lot of people make, especially in the beginning. Two, building a sense of community within your own team. All the small things, as Blink-182 said, you can give your team members during difficult times means a lot. How can that be done? Birthday wishes for your team members. You could post on Instagram. You can send a personal email to them. Something I do during my meetings is I have a thing called Good News. And during the Good News portion of our meetings, I make sure to shout out anyone that has a birthday or anything good that's happened to them during the week, any award that they've gotten. That builds a sense of community. And you know that the people who are here and surrounding you know you. You could do certificates of appreciation, highly recommend Canva, or even video messages for graduating seniors, e-board members, or outstanding non-e-board members. And my third and final part is, how do we replace an in-person retreat? Very hard question, but the first thing that I gotta say before I get too deep into that is just to make sure that you're thinking about the time. For in-person team building or in-person retreat that can go for hours, virtually has to be shorter. You want to enforce and help retention. And you can even have those meetings in the span of multiple days if possible. But just make sure that it's different than the way you did it in person. The next thing you can do for that is having engaging speakers. Search up motivational speakers. And I also recommend getting in touch with ASGA for this. They are, and they know of many people who are experienced in speaking with student government people and also who can inspire the students. And also maybe coming up with games. One meeting I had, we did bingo. Another meeting I had, we did a Netflix watch party. Untraditional situations calls for creative solutions. And that's all I got. Thank you guys for listening in.
Take it away, Butch. Any thoughts on leading your team from
Yeah.
the ASGA perspective?
Well, okay, so it always, I mean, particularly now, it always comes back to when something's wrong, it's usually my fault. and that's true as a leader of any organization. If there are problems with staff and other colleagues, it's usually my fault. And it's how I'm communicating with them, and I got to analyze that. It's like be looking within, and that may sound cliche. I don't believe it is at all, though. We got to look within. Am I terse? People, my team thinks I'm very terse in my emails. Why? Because I say yes, no. You know, and it's seen as, boy, that's got an attitude. You know, and if we're reliant too much on technology in the text part and writing an email, there's a danger of misconceptions. You know, and do I care? I mean, do I care about people's lives right now? Do I care about what they're going through? Have I asked about it? I'm not a psychologist. I never studied that, but I've done this a long time. And that's a big factor also. We got to look kind of within, and this is real. This is not just philosophical debate. It's, do I treat them with respect? Am I only wanting things from them? Do I care about them beyond coming to a meeting? Do I have punitive punishments if they don't show or do exactly what I want? These are all things we got to look at, our kind of internal look of what are we doing. And usually it's my fault, and I'll admit it. It's usually my fault when something's not going right with our team. And so I'll take credit for it. I'll take the blame because I didn't do these things that I'm talking about. I didn't ask, like Ashley said, you know, those little things, they matter. And you know, I'm very organized as a leader, and so I have checklists of things. And so I'm even thinking, Ashley, your idea, you know, go through the birthdays and the new internship and a job and a new relationship and the new dog you got and the whatever, literally going through kind of a checklist of things, making sure everybody had a chance to chime in on their personal lives a little bit. And that's, we even in normal meetings, you know, most of our meetings in student government go too long, right? And this is kind of a tangent, but I always believe there should be a part of that meeting designed for the personal side. And so it's recognition of things outside the organization that we're dealing with.
That's so great. I see some great comments here, some tips, Yulian chiming in about using rosebud thorn, which is literally my favorite thing to do in terms of getting people to reflect on, you know, the good, the bad, and, you know, what's coming, what are they looking forward to. At Running Start, we start our team meetings with everyone sharing a high and a low. So to be able to check in on what's going on, and, you know, I think it's really important to know when someone on your team, you know, isn't having a great week, because that might affect how you communicate with them, and, you know, give them a little bit more slack. So I really like that suggestion. And someone else, a couple people asked about, you know, how do you keep your team accountable during this time when you're not, you know, seeing them do their work every minute and you're, you know, relying on them doing good work remotely. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could definitely talk a little bit about that. I would say it's something that's very difficult, and it is definitely an uncomfortable conversation to have for anyone that's a leader. But one of the most important things that I think you can do about this is, one, to try to understand why that's happening. Like, is it something of the matter of like they're not paying attention? Or is there something going on that you may not have considered before? So I would say reach out to them privately. You don't want to highlight anyone. You don't want to call anyone out. Very dangerous behavior, very negative behavior. So make sure to address it in a manner like that, private, and also have some follow-up. Encourage them to come up with ways that they can kind of like improve upon this. Like, if you say that I feel like maybe there might be a disconnect, I feel like you may not be as engaged as I would like, see what their answer is. The most important point that I can make at the end is be patient, reach out, understand, follow up. That's all. I hope that answered your question. Maybe Butch can give a supplementary answer to what I said.
Okay, so people aren't involved. There are a lot of reasons, but it starts with this. They were never involved to begin with. So they got involved for wrong reasons. They ran for office because they had a friend or somebody they wanted to date or something. Who knows why they got involved? And so that's a problem right initially. So those of you that are dealing with this, it's going to be hard to correct it. We correct it when we first are running for office. We make mandatory training part of running for office and expectations being part of that. And we even have contracts that we ask officers and members to sign. We have samples of those contracts, and it's how I'm going to operate. And so the person actually creates their own contract on how they're going to operate the year. I can't stand it when student governments have all of these punishments. You don't go to 2 meetings and you're removed from office. So we spend half our time impeaching everybody. Like I said, it's true. We see, all of our time devoted to it. So it's really more of a matter of when your next election cycle is, getting that in order on people. I'd rather you have not enough people, missing positions, people not filled in those positions, than people who are filled just as a body in a chair. And this is what happens to a lot of student governments. Many of us brag about, we have 50 members or we have 100 members. The truth is we've got about 5 that are really we can count on. That's what I'm getting at. Is I didn't say it well, but we've got to get where the people who are involved are committed from day one, because we've trained them and we've provided resources to get them to understand what their role is. So then we don't have to it's like a child-parent relationship. I have children still in the home, and I got to say, go out there and take the trash out, or go mow, or whatever. And they're not invested in it. You see what I mean? And so maybe that's not a good analogy, but the idea is many of your members, they're not invested in the organization. They see it as something to do, a friend, maybe something fun to do. They're not totally invested. And that's what we've got to change. It's a whole dynamic change.
Yeah. And I'll chime in there and say, a lot of you it's possible you've heard people in the administration at your schools use the term like challenge and support, which is a pretty common term in student affairs. Think about, you want to make sure that you're challenging student leaders, but also giving them the support that they need. And as a student leader, you can have that mindset with your team as well. And I put in the chat a resource that I love called Radical Candor, where their whole idea is you need to show that you care personally. We talked a lot about that at the beginning, and show that you're invested in the lives of your team, but then also challenge directly. And that's the part about keeping people accountable, but that you really need to have that balance of both. Otherwise, if you tip one way or the other, if you're just always challenging but never showing that you care, then people aren't going to want to listen to you or engage with you. But if you just only ever, show that you care and don't ever challenge people and give direct feedback, then things aren't going to happen. So it's about finding that balance. Oh, and Melody has a question. When student leaders who campaigned with different goals got elected and became part of the same team, how would you recommend setting goals and priorities that everyone can get behind? That's a good one.
The first way that I would go about that is I would try to think during the first meeting that you'd want to have this as a large discussion, and you want to speak with your whole team and say, okay, so all different people all come together. What are our priorities? I recommend, because we are as a student leader, you're working in a very short period of time. I would recommend sending top 3 priorities that you have within your team as a whole. Take a vote, go through a democratic process, and decide there and then move forward that way. So you have the main goals. And if there are some people who are also working with the main goals and maybe doing some side projects, maybe they're having a tabling that enforces the goal they had before, that's okay. But just make sure that you're moving towards a focused leadership. You don't want to look confused. You want to make sure that the goal that you have happens, even if it's not the same with everyone. That's all I got.
Ashley, you're awesome.
Thank you.
I always teach this. You see this? Everybody can see it. 3 goals that we work on. That's what we always teach. I don't care if you could be UCLA, the largest student government in America, or a community college, doesn't matter. It's 3 things we have to agree on, a couple of things that we all work toward. And those other ones that Melody mentioned that have different goals, those are supplemental. We have to come to a resolution on this, and we can't move forward as effective leaders. Now, my question back would be, do those student leaders know for sure students want that from them? And I challenge them, prove it. Prove that students want you to work on this. How do you prove it? And I'll talk about that more in a minute too.
Yeah. And Chris is saying he suggests that you also establish mutually beneficial goals from the administrative standpoint too. That's, bringing our first 2 topics together there. Thanks, Chris. And so we're going to go into our final topic, which is around engaging the student body. So we'll talk a little bit about how to prove it, how to find out exactly what the student body actually wants, so that you can be making that case to the best of your ability. And I'm going to introduce Sophia Clinton, our final student speaker, to introduce that topic.
Hello. So my name is Sophia Clinton, and I'm from Syracuse, New York. I became involved through Jess with Running Start, where I'm currently an intern, and I'm also an alum of the high school program, which was awesome. I highly recommend it. And I will be attending Syracuse University's Maxwell School next year, so I'll be staying in Syracuse. And I've been a student leader throughout my high school career and was elected the president of my class when I attended the U.S. Senate PAGE program in 2018. So I've worked with a couple administrations and kind of been able to have varying experiences in different places with how to engage student bodies and things like that. And I'm also currently working full-time as a nanny with these two potential student leaders. Hey guys, so they're listening in right now, so hopefully they're learning some great things. You guys are awesome. So with that, I'm going to go into some specific suggestions on how to just engage the student body and survey them during this time when, you know, we can't be together physically. These are all things that I've done that have been really successful. So first of all, I think number one is taking full advantage of Google Forms. You know, you can ask about specific ideas a student has, what they'd like to see from student leaders and administration, and other questions that are easily answered through the site and through student engagement as well. Obviously, there is a certain level of promotion that has to go into that, but it is a really, really great site that I highly recommend everybody take advantage of. And also just taking advantage of social media. And so using, you know, Instagram stories and polls and other features on Facebook, like I know Ashley and I were talking about Instagram and Facebook Lives, which has been so helpful to kind of feel a little bit more connected right now, where kids can, you know, you can record them, you can do whatever you want, and you can kind of engage and comment on stuff. And really you can allow students and others to tune in and, you know, from the comfort of their own homes for various meetings and virtual events. And my school has had a lot of success surveying our student body through social media, just because our social media is completely run by students. And the social media is constantly used to celebrate the students or the successes of the students in our school, such as, you know, birthday shout outs that Ashley mentioned before, which have been, you know, just trying to celebrate them so that they're constantly engaged with that site and pay attention to it. And so we've used that to announce events and, you know, ask questions and, you know, take that and kind of allow them to go to the Google Forms from there. So it's something that students pay attention to a whole bunch, and I think has been really successful in my experience. And lastly, I've had a lot of success using student newspapers to my advantage. So, you know, I will say that since we're no longer on campus, students have been paying a lot more attention to student newspapers and, you know, social media so that they can feel somewhat connected to their peers and stay kind of in the know right now, because we obviously can't be together. And they've allowed me and other student leaders to promote virtual events and get students excited and engaged, as well as, you know, I totally suggest using them to write what you think by maybe like writing editorials or different opinion pieces. I know a lot of student-run newspapers welcome that, and just kind of getting your word out so you'll have other people maybe agree with you and reach out and you can, you know, go from there. But those are just my suggestions that I was kind of brainstorming up a little bit ago, and that's all I have. And I know that Butch will have a whole bunch more.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Good stuff. You know, I'm not a fan of gimmicks, right? I really am not a fan of gimmicks. And if we're going to engage our student body, there's no gimmick that's going to work. I can't give you the red pill or the blue pill and suddenly everybody's engaged. Can say this: many of us, if we're honest, if you're going to be honest right now, what do students think about your student government? Do they even know you? Do they know you exist? What do they think about your role? What have you accomplishing? And what have you accomplished? They know anything you do. And so if you can't answer real affirmatively there, then it shows that we are not connected. And what that means is this is a perfect time for us to enhance our social media web presence. We've done webinars on this again, but I'm going to hit it again, this important topic. Our websites are bad in student governments around the country. We don't have a way for students to connect with us. And so that's number one. We got to improve it. We have resources to teach you how to do that. Secondly, we need to look at schools and institutions that already have distance education student governments. Okay, so one of them is one of our founding members, Washington State. I don't know if anybody is there at this webinar from Washington State, but I did notice somebody from Penn State World. They're a brand new student government in the last couple of years developing online government. And so we should model if some of these student governments that are already connecting with their students online, that's all they are. They don't have a physical presence. So we've got to learn how they do it. And many of them have been able to get access to be able to contact individual students one-on-one. You may think that would be against privacy laws and rules. They've been able to accomplish this at many schools in student government, getting access to contact information for students. There was a school in California, the student body president personally called every single incoming first-year student. That student body president, she called literally every person who was coming in. So that, now did she reach them? No, but she reached out, and she left voicemails, and she gave them her private ways to reach her. And so we've really got to be much more connected to our students in a one-on-one basis. And if you have 10 members of your government, we should be approaching, right now in particular, since you're not there on campus, 4 or 5, maybe more individual students a day that you personally try to reach out to. Run the math. If you have 50 people in your government, you did 5 a day, you got 250 people you've talked to every single day. And that adds up. And even large enrollment institutions that are present here, that can help you reach significant numbers of your students. What are you learning? You're learning what they want from you. You're making connections. You're talking to them. You're getting ideas. And and here's a really key factor, is you're making yourselves apparent to them. So they can't say, what does student government do? I don't know what it does. I mean, students around the country say this all the time. I don't know what student government does at our school. So this overcomes it. If we're talking in person, you can't say that. You talk to the student body president or the vice president. So there's a lot of things going on here. ASGA has a resource, how to survey your students. Surveying sounds boring, I realize that, but it's not, because surveying is connections with your constituents. Those connections give you power, they give you influence, they give you knowledge. And the key is, if you know more than your administrators about your student needs, then you are valuable, you are relevant. And that's what we all aspire to be. We want to be relevant and be treated as colleagues because they respect our opinions. You see, and we can't have that. Here's a quick example. When I was in school, I was at a community college. I was student body vice president. 2 students came to me and said, Butch, do something about parking. And so, I know parking is not really an issue right now. It was then. Okay, so, and I went to the president and said, Mr. President, students are upset about parking. And the president said, you and I both know you have no research to back this up, that you've only talked to a couple students, and you have no research that says anybody's missing class because they can't park. You and I both know it's a matter of convenience. They want to park in the classroom. They want to literally drive their car into the class and go into the air conditioning, because Florida right now is like 99 degrees out. So they didn't want to walk at all. My point is, we had no data to back that up. So what did I look like? I looked like a child playing at student government. That's what I looked like. And I want all of you to have facts to back you up when you go to administration and make a request. You have facts to back you up. You have knowledge that says 70% of our students are missing class because they can't park, you see? And that's just an example. And then you come with a proposal on possible solutions to that. And this is, again, about strategy. So, and other questions, please.
Yeah, well, maybe, Yulian, there's an interesting conversation happening in the chat around coalition building, particularly in making sure that the voices of minority students are heard. Yulian, do you want to chime in and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So that's a really good question. And I have faced this issue time and time again throughout like the past year or two. I think the first thing to figure out is like recognizing like what demographics are at your university. And we've talked about this before, but specifically at my university, we just became a minority majority institution. And so that changes a lot of things in terms of what our priorities are supposed to look like. Who are you supposed to be talking to? What kind of conversations we're supposed to be having? And I totally understand, because at one point, our institution also was a PWI. So I've seen both like sides of the coin, which is very weird. But at a PWI, just because, it's not a majority like Black, Brown, or Indigenous population, or just any marginalized student does not mean their voices shouldn't be heard. And so I guess the first thing I think a lot of people like to look into is, what does the representation of our student leadership looks like? And actually that tends to be a lot of the reasons why minority students try and run for either student government. That was the main reason why I did, was because I didn't see a lot of representation. And so that is one way. But sometimes we're facing issues that we don't really have the time or the scope to be able to run for office at that point. It's the middle of the year, and we can't be able to run a campaign yet. And so that's why I kind of bring in the importance of coalition building. Something that worked really well was working with other organizations that specifically focus on issues for these students. So we created a really great relationship with our Black Student Union, with our Native American Student Association, with a lot of these identity-based groups that already are doing the work and are already having these conversations. So what we don't want to do in student government is try and replicate the conversations that are already happening, but rather put a spotlight on the people that are already trying to do the work and the people that are spearheading these types of conversations about whatever issues that you have on your campus. So that's why I think building that coalition with really powerful groups like student government, depending on whatever scope of power that your student government might have, is really great, and bringing these groups into meetings with you. And I think a lot of administration really likes to put together a lot of committees, and I would say that not necessarily the committees aren't great, but that there are ways to go about it without necessarily having to create 5 separate committees for these conversations. So that's why I think creating a committee within students and organizations are really important. And when there's a particular issue, that may come around that is an emergency or something, you have that group to be able to fall back on and be like, okay, well, let's all come together and let's meet. And so what we were able to do my year was put together a coalition, and we met monthly, where we were just okay, just to check in, what's going on, what can we do, what kind of conversations can we bring up in these meetings, do y'all want to come to these meetings with us? And that way we built that structure on our own if we didn't have that already. But yeah, that's how I would say I would recommend going about types of issues in regards to marginalized students.
That's great. Thank you, Yolian. I want to come back to a question someone asked way at the beginning, which was just, what are some ideas for, if everything's online, then a big way of reaching out to students is sort of off the table, which is, doing events and tabling and the in-person things. So what are some ways to replicate that if everything needs to be virtual?
Okay, so ASJA has a resource, we call it signature programs. It's things that student governments do for their students. And that's a resource, and at last count was nearly 900 different services programs that student governments do. Some of those will not be relevant in times we're in, many will be. So that's what I would recommend, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things student government can do. Is that programming? No, it isn't. Is it dances, parties, events, concerts? No, it isn't. It's other services that are provided. Most common around the country is a discount program. Is that relevant now when you're off campus? Sure it is. Saving money for students if you haven't done it. About 10% of the nation's student governments have a discount card. And so that's something that's just one of many examples. There are hundreds and literally hundreds of examples. And that's found in our toolbox also. So anybody that needs to get access to that, just write me at the end.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question. Stefania and Jesse are both asking, how can we spice up our general meetings and increase the student turnout?
I can just say a couple things. I can expand on what I was saying before with Instagram. I know probably all of us here have had at least one or two experiences with, struggles with student turnout, and, people might not come or be as passionate about things as you are. But definitely just taking advantage of every single, site or social media situation that students might pay attention to. So again, student newspapers, Instagram accounts, reaching out to certain organizations that I know there's a lot of organizations on campus at Syracuse that students pay attention to, that, you know, you could reach out to and just say like, hey, can you make this announcement? But just really trying to just brainstorm all of your resources and things that students pay attention to and using that to your advantage. But yeah, I've definitely struggled with that a whole bunch.
So my question back is, are we talking about the general student body attending? Or are you talking about your own members? And that's the question. Is that totally is different? There goes another boy.
It seems like, and Stefania can chime in, but increased student turnout to me seems, yeah, student body interaction at the meetings,
Yeah.
she says.
Yeah, so, and that's all dependent on what you're talking about, what event, project, program. They're not going to come to your meetings. That's just the truth. Around the country, we shouldn't base our effectiveness on how well attended our student government meetings are. A lot of times we can't even barely get quorum, let alone have outside participation. So that's a starting point. And then engaging them, it's all dependent on the event and the project and the program, isn't it? You know, so that there's no magic formula that works. I agree with Sophia. We got to use all things at our disposal. We're not very good at marketing in student government. In fact, we're terrible at it. I urge all of you to look at getting a class in studying marketing or advertising to take you on as a client. If you know what I mean, like an advertising agency, like McDonald's has advertising agencies to make you remember their jingles. And we all can see, if I show a picture of this, we all know that's Nike, you know, and so we have images that have been created by advertising, and we're not very good at it in student government. So could you get a marketing class to take you on as a client, so to speak, and help you develop marketing materials, because they're studying this and they're getting expert advice from professors. So you're going to get all kinds of support. Do any of you have a marketing director? If you don't, we need one. Maybe a whole marketing staff of students who are studying marketing at your institution or advertising or public relations, and we get them to get academic credit for interning with your student government, and they could be the ones that develop your marketing materials to promote everything that you do, from events to programs to whatever you're doing, speakers, etc. And so we're getting support, so it's not just one person overwhelmed, you know, and so we're getting outside support. And what if you had a marketing class of 30 people working on your behalf? That's pretty powerful.
That's great. And Tina in the chat has a genius idea that they used to offer free lunch when they were on campus, and so now they send via Grubhub. That's so creative. I love that. And I hate to do this, but it's just about 4 o'clock Eastern, so we've got to wrap up. I knew this was gonna fly by. I want to share, and I'm going to put in the chat, a big way that you can stay in touch with Running Start is to join the Running Start Network. It's an online network of you know, anyone who is interested in Running Start's mission, from a young woman who's maybe looking for a mentor to we have high-level mentors who want to give back and be a part of the community. But it's a great place to connect, have discussions, have access to resources, and find mentors. So I encourage everyone to go onto the Running Start Network. You can also connect with me, and also Sophia, Ashley, and Yoleon. We're all on the network, and so that's a great way to stay in touch with us. Butch, any last words from you?
Yeah, thanks. It's been a pleasure. It's always great talking to student leaders and advisors. So just want to remind you the resources that I've mentioned. If any of you have needs, you're not an ASJA member, I urge you to consider joining, obviously. But if you're not a member, even today, we'll give you access. All you got to do is write me. Here's the email. You write me personally today, and I'll see that you get, if I can type, access. There it is, butch@asjaonline.com, so you can get resources, and a lot of the stuff we've discussed, we've already done research on this, and we've done it for years, so could be very helpful. I love Andrea's idea, Campus Crunch. That is so great. See, that's the kind of thing we store in our database so that you can steal her idea, right?
That's so great. So a lot of resources for everyone to follow up with. Thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to, you know, continuing to stay in touch with you. So please do keep in contact with both Running Start and ASJA, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.